Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, ciao, bonjour, namaste, jumbo, bienvenidos, and happy new year. My name is Jed Lee, and this is Reading with Your Kids. We are coming to you from the beautiful and book-loving neighborhood of Reedville, located in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so delighted and so very honored that you are joining us in our mission to help all families grow closer through reading. We do that by sharing fun, thoughtful, and thought-provoking conversations with fascinating people who just happen to be writing books for kids of all ages. You can join us in our mission by telling all of your family and friends about the show and letting them know that they can hear us on the WREB AM/FM 24/7 radio network. And they can find us on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Good Pods, Podcast Addict, CastBox. Wherever you find your favorite shows, you can find Reading with Your Kids. Phenomenal interview to start off the new year. First up, Kao Kalia Yang and illustrator Jen Shen are on the show to celebrate the Blue House I Loved. Later in the show, we have a listen back to a conversation we had with the executive director and new boss clown of Clowns Without Borders, Frankie Tompkins. We are so excited. We are about to talk to the creators of the Blue House I Loved. First, joining us once again, the author, Kao Kalia Yang. Hey, Kalia, how are you?
Hello, Jed. I'm doing well. Thank you for having us back.
Delighted to have you back on. And also joining us, the illustrator, Jen Shen. Hey, Jen, how are you?
Hi, Jed. So nice to be here with you today, and Kalia.
Yes. Kalia and I had about a year or two ago, had a wonderful conversation, and I am really looking forward to learning about the Blue House I Loved. I understand that this is a house you lived in and loved.
My aunt and my uncle and my cousins lived there, and I got to live there for all the good times. It was my field trip after school, our weekend getaways. It was this other home that was near and dear to me.
I think a lot of kids can relate to that we're, it's not our home, but it's my grandmother's home. It's my aunt's home. I know from my niece, she lived with us for about a month and a half or so, and I think she calls on all the international kids that we hosted in our home. Hopefully, they all look at this as their home. It can be those homes can be very special.
Very, very special. I think about it all the time, which is why this book now exists.
So, tell us a little bit about the story that we're going to read with our kids.
The Blue House I Love is about a blue house that once existed on the east side of St. Paul. It was a house, a duplex that housed new refugees, and in our case, Hmong refugees from America's secret war in Laos, from the refugee camps. So for a time, my aunt and my uncle shared this 2-bedroom house with their many, many kids and all of us. And it was a beautiful experience, crowded experience. My cousins slept on the porch where their hair froze during the cold wintry nights. They climbed in and out through a window that connected the living room and the porch. It was a house where before the cold winter, my mom and my aunt would gather in the tiny kitchen, and they would parboil all of the green beans and make all of the foods that we would need from the gardens that they kept for the coming winter. It was where my cousins jumped in the bed and listened to Richard Marx songs. First introduction for many refugees to American music, actually, Richard Marx, the 80s and the 90s, early 90s. And so it's this house where I think we learned about America together. We learned about each other and made the memories that would hold us close across a long life.
Yeah. I was not a refugee. My family did not have to spend any time in a refugee camp, but we grew up in a similar. I didn't grow up in a duplex. I grew up in a triple decker, what we called here in Boston, 3 families right on top of each other, like a stack of 3 pancakes. And I have memories of my aunt, who lived 4 doors down, was the first one in the neighborhood to have a color TV. And so all the guys in the neighborhood went up and carried the color TV down to the porch. And of course, back then, TVs were about 500 pounds. And they would bring it down so that everybody in the neighborhood could sit on the sidewalk to watch Batman in color. So I can relate to that closeness. And it's funny, you look back, and I think a lot of kids who grew up in the suburbs would take a look at that house and realize, there are how many people living in there? They don't have your own bedroom. You got to share a bathroom, and they'd be horrified. But I think you and I have these wonderful memories of those tight, crowded, cramped spaces.
Yes, and then the fun and the stories that we were surrounded by, the stories that we made in that shared space.
Yeah. Jen, for you, was this a living situation that you could relate to, or as you read the manuscript, were you scrambling and thinking, how am I going to, I don't know anything about what it's like to live like that?
Jed, I'm so glad you asked. I also am a child of immigrants and a granddaughter of refugees. So although I don't have the direct experience of being a refugee myself, a lot of what Kalia talks about in The Blue House I Loved really resonates and is reflected in my own story. And so as soon as I read the manuscript for The Blue House, I was really moved, and it felt I felt such a resonance with some of the imagery that she was talking about, and some of the stories, and really the big love and the crowdedness, but the love that is really able to be afforded in those cramped spaces. I think it's really incredible what immigrants are able to do with homes in America. Oftentimes when immigrant families or refugee families come here, we find ourselves in homes that aren't really reflective of the way we live. And we're really creative in being able to find ways to make our houses work. For me, I slept in the dining room of my small apartment that I lived in with my mom for many years. And it didn't make sense to me to have a separate room for dining because, my family is Korean and we eat and sleep, all in the same space. And we just move the furniture around based on what we're doing at that time. So every room is just called room. And so when I was reading Kalia's manuscript and reading about how her cousins were sleeping on the porch, that just made so much sense to me. And I was so delighted to be able to bring that type of living to life through drawing, because I didn't see stories like that when I was growing up as a kid. And the way that I lived was something that maybe I realized over time that I should be ashamed of, because I didn't see it in any of the cartoons or the stories that I saw. So it was a real delight to be able to put visual form to Kalia's beautiful words.
Yeah. Kalia, I can relate a little bit to your cousin sleeping on the porch. I slept in a room that had been a porch. They just put walls up around it. Of course, there was no insulation and there was no heat in the room, so winter get cut. I don't remember my hair freezing, but it could have. And of course, in my very first apartment, that was right down the street from Logan Airport, and of course didn't have any air conditioning, I slept out on the fire escape very often because it was really hot back then.
And that's so magical. I think in the imagination of a child, that possibility that you could sleep on a fire escape, feel the wind rustling through the night. I mean, there's a kind of magic to this kind of living that I think we're all talking about. And it is nostalgic. And I think it frees up a piece of my heart again, which is one reason why I can't let go of this memory of this blue house. Now it's a plot of green grass. But in my life, every time I've ever passed it, I've always said, that's where Auntie Ju and Uncle lived. That's where we did this. That's where we played hopscotch in the basement. That's where we did that. Like all of these ghost houses, ghost living spaces that have made us who we are. Too precious to just let go.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioning that. About 4 months ago, I was driving my beautiful wife home from the hospital. We were visiting her mom in the hospital. And the route that I'd normally take, there's all sorts of traffic. So I said, well, I'll cut through. And I cut through very close to my old neighborhood. And I said, what why don't we just take a drive down? And I got to the street where I lived on, and it was blocked off, and there was all this fire apparatus. And I thought, immediately, oh no, the house where I lived is on fire. And it wasn't. It was 2 houses down, and thankfully no one got hurt. But I was really surprised at how I felt, because it was so, my goodness, it was four plus decades since I lived in the house or lived in the neighborhood, but I still had that connection.
Yes, these feelings that live on inside of us. You know, one of the blue house isn't the only house that I've loved that's disappeared on me. I'm a kid from the refugee camps of Thailand.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when you're born in a refugee camp, when you have the opportunity to leave it behind, there's this knowledge, and there's always been this knowledge in my heart that the place where I was born was never meant to exist, and that it won't exist in time. That if I want it to be real, then I had a responsibility to remember it, to keep it real inside of me. And I think the older we get, Jed, the more we make these realizations. These spaces around us, they change. But once they were there, and they were there when we were there together, and they help us become who we are today.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, totally, that protectiveness, that fear, that love that remains is so, I think, important to the experience of memory. And especially because we live in a time in a world that's so eager to forget.
Mm. Jen, one of the things that touched me about Kalia is that her books, her writing is so heartfelt. She's so courageous in sharing her memories and her emotions, and she allows herself to be very, very vulnerable. Did that make illustrating this book, did you feel an extra responsibility to have to get it right to honor Kalia's memories?
Absolutely. I mean, wow, I feel like you just went inside my brain and just expressed something that I really actually struggled with through the making of this book. I felt such a big responsibility to tell Kalia's story and to honor her words with the gift that I have, which is to draw and also to be able to render through buildings, through architectural means. And so I felt that this was a unique unique skill and unique gift that I could really give to this book. And I really got into my head about it. And it really, also having had a new American history and experience in my own family, I felt an extra responsibility, and just also not having seen so many works like this that are so heartfelt and so speaking to an American immigrant experience. It's just a lot. And so I really admire Kalia for being so brave for so many of us to be able to touch this type of work, to touch these memories, to touch these ghosts inside of us, and to bring them to life. And she really, through her words, really gave me the opportunity to also do that. And so it was a real struggle. And I'm so grateful for the process, to have been able to engage in this process and to work with the publisher as well, specifically Eric Anderson, who was so trusting and so gentle in his guidance, in believing in me and believing that I could deliver this product. And ultimately, I'm so happy with the product. I'm so happy with the outcome, and I put my whole heart into it because Kalia put her whole heart into it too, and that's what it deserved. Yeah.
Kalia, there are many authors who come on, and they don't remember to mention the illustrator, and that's of course understandable. But you were somebody who said, "Hey, I want Jen on this interview with me." So, how did you? It's obviously you didn't invite her on here to tell her that her illustrations were horrible. Talk to me about what it was like to see those illustrations when they first came through.
So Jen and I were both Paul and Daisy Searles fellows. Years ago, we met in New York, and we had dinner together, and we sat together, and I started, sharing that I'm a writer, and I do children's books and adult titles, and Jen was then an architectural student at Yale, and I thought, and Jen's like, "Oh, I'm interested," so we get talking, and I get this idea, there's this, I know, really talented architect who's interested in drawing children's books. How do we make this possible? And I knew that I had the Blue House, in the pipeline. It was coming. And so when Eric Anderson, the same editor that Jen's been working with, said, Kalia, who do you want to draw this book? I knew immediately. I said, Jen Shen. I don't know. You have to write and you have to see how it works out, but that's who I want. And it's rare that a writer gets to choose their illustrator, but Eric Anderson is that rare editor who will trust his writers to make these calls and go wherever we need to go to make it possible. And so it's from the onset, it was a gift. I knew it would be a magical pairing. I've always been interested. How do we make homes? How do we make homes ours, right? There are structures that are built, but how do we make them ours? And nobody I felt would understand this the way Jen would interpret it, the way Jen would understand it. The first time I saw the illustrations, I called my children and I have 3, and my husband into the room. I'm like, look, the Blue House is real again. And that's exactly what it feels like to me. Through Jen's artistry, the Blue House is real again. Not only to me, but or my cousins who live there, but all of the people, the neighborhood, the community, all of the Blue Houses that have existed across all of our lives. Even Jed, you're talking in many ways about the Blue House that existed for you. All these Blue Houses. And so what a gift. What a beautiful gift. And Jen, I thank you for it. And then I have to say, it's such a rare gift to have an illustrator who isn't afraid to speak. A lot of illustrators, they do the incredible work of drawing, bringing something to life, and then they prefer to be, you go into the world and you push it. But Jen is willing to push this with me. And that is, what a joy, Jen. Thank you.
Jen, as an architectural student, you looked at buildings a lot differently than we do. Mm-hmm. Did that experience, did that come in handy in creating and turning the Blue House into a unique character?
Of course. This was such a dream project to work on, because we are trained, as our architects to look at buildings in a certain way, and to think about living in a certain way. And here was this opportunity where I got to use that training, use that rigorous background that I had, and also tie it in with a piece that oftentimes wasn't really welcome in architecture school or in the profession, which is to think about the ways that immigrants are using architecture in the wrong way, in ways that they're not supposed to be used, in ways that, we were told that this isn't the way you live in a house. And I had this opportunity to prove to everyone that actually this is architecture too, that we can look at this building, at this Blue House, at any Blue House, with the same care and dedication and detail that we look at architecture and we study architecture, and we can give it the same amount of attention and the same amount of authority that this is the way people live and this really matters. And so it was such a privilege to be able to bring that knowledge to this project. I did an incredible amount of research. Actually, I did a lot of research into the houses of this time period in this specific neighborhood, and I got very into this 3D model that I made of the house so that I could really inhabit it in my own mind. And then I was able to really sort of break that down and turn it into what it ultimately became.
Yeah. Jen, one of the things I oftentimes ask authors is, did any of the characters surprise you at any time with the decision they made or something that they said? I'm curious, did the Blue House surprise you at all as you were creating those 3D models and bringing this house to life? Was there anything about it that really kind of surprised you?
Oh, that's such a great question. I suppose more than surprise, it really felt like an act of discovery. A lot of what we do as architects is, we do a little bit of forensics, building forensics, especially if you're doing something like a retrofit or an adaptive reuse project. You have to go into a building and learn about what is currently there, how it's built now, and how that differs from the way it was supposed to be, for instance, because things always happen in construction where a building is made in a different way than was anticipated. And it really felt like that process of discovery for this project as well, where I was thinking through, I was almost doing reverse engineering, where I was thinking through how I thought the layout would be, how the floor plan would be, what the construction would be like. And it was a process of discovery. It was a process of realizing that, this porch was probably added on, or it definitely wasn't originally meant to be an enclosed porch. So that must have been something that happened later on. And what would that mean for this house and this house as a character? And how do I draw that? And so really, I think it was just more of a process of discovery. And it was fascinating because it's something that's also not physically there, and something that I had to also imagine at the same time.
Yeah. Kalia, as we're talking here about your blue house and mentioning the house that I grew up on, my family and I, we live in a beautiful neighborhood of Boston. We're as far away from downtown as you can be. There's a wildlife sanctuary that abuts our property. And it's on a really big piece of land. It's at the end of a dead-end street, so the extra land is all this big, beautiful backyard. And we've all realized that we're the last family that's probably going to live in this house, because there's such a need for housing that I think when it's time for us to leave, it'll be turned into an apartment building. And there's a big part of us that, we sit down and we're going, yeah, probably. And, we think about it intellectually, and it's like, oh, yeah, of course. But I don't think any of us, my kids, my wife, myself, the family members who spent so much time here, the kids who live with us from around the world, I don't know if we've accepted emotionally that at some point this house probably won't be here.
Oh, I don't know that you can. The blue house, now it's a plot of grass, but like I say, the ghost of it stands for me. I don't think that the human heart necessarily lets go. One of the interactions in this book is a story where the aunt is feeding a newborn child out on this porch. It's an open back porch, and a young Kalia is observing, and she says, "Oh, you have the longest breast I've ever seen. One day it's going to hit the ground." Which I had said to my aunt, and she just started laughing. But that memory of those words coming from my mouth and the trill of her laughter has stayed with me. As I've grown up, I've been mortified, and as I've become a mother myself and gone through that process, I'm like, oh, how much I didn't know. How much I didn't know, and how much is this a part of a life, and particularly, I think, immigrant life. When everybody's together in each other's spaces, when you see things and you make observations, and they land where they do. But those words have stayed, and they now live in this book, as they do in my mind, Jed. I said those words, they came out of my mouth, and she just laughed her way through them. Mm-hmm. And now this moment is embedded in the blue house I loved. I don't think we let go of certain things, and I think there is no reason to. Yeah. I think that whatever becomes. And we, all of us, human life is so short in the scale of everything. One lifetime is a slow blinking of the eyes, and it's all over. As parents, we look at those little ones and we know if all goes according to plan, then they make it to the future that we'll never see. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And your children will have to meet this maybe apartment building rising where you all once gathered around a table. But the ghost of that gathering will remain. The heart being let go.
Right. I love that. It's reassuring. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Kalia, what kind of conversations do you think families, and Jen, I'm going to ask you the same. What kind of conversations do you think families can have as they're curled up on the couch in their blue house, reading the blue house I loved?
Oh, I hope it unlocks so many stories, Jed, of all of the houses, the places that have held us safe. In the Hmong culture, the culture that I come from, when somebody dies, you have to go back through every place that has held you safe, and you have to thank the walls for standing. You have to thank the roof for holding. You have to thank all of these spaces and places across a lifetime. And I'm really hoping that when families read this book, they can all gather close. And there are the houses that we've had, but the hoped for blue houses as well. As a child, I had dreams of future homes that I like to house my family in. Spaces where my mom might be surrounded by her plants. Where there'd be enough window to let in the light so that these plants would survive the Minnesota winters. That all of these conversations will swirl in and out of these places where families are close and words abound.
Yeah, yeah. Jen, one of the things that we encourage families to do is, especially before they read a book, is to take a picture walk through the book and have conversations about these pictures that we're seeing. What do you think the story is behind this? What kind of conversations do you think families can have, or do you hope families have, as they're taking a picture walk through your illustrations?
Wow, what a great question. I really hope that when families and children are looking at these images, that they're thinking about how their homes have souls, about how buildings that contain such important memories and such important activities and such important love for each other, for one another, the buildings themselves are vessels for all of that. And they're really the witnesses of all of this love and memory and activity. And I hope that families and children are able to think about that and think about the ways in which their room or their favorite corner or their kitchen has housed all of that, and the ways in which their building, their homes have really allowed for that to happen, and really see them as characters in their own stories. In all of the little, in the nooks throughout the book, I try to put in small details that are realistic, but also are imagination. For instance, there's a little mouse in one of the floorboards. And I try to think about the lives that happen within the house, within the blue house, without us even knowing. Because I think that's the privilege of the house. The house gets to see all of these activities. So hopefully that inspires some of your readers and parents to think about their homes as members of the family too.
Yeah. As you were both talking, this space in our home where I am had been the room where our international students lived. And there was one year, I don't know if I told you this, Kalia, there was one year that we were the cool Chinese home. Our student, we would have dozens of students over the house. And there was one night in particular, we had 8 young women from China down in this room, giggling and laughing and speaking in Mandarin. And it was just, this is such a strong memory, such a nice memory to, just that you guys just helped pop back into my head. So I really appreciate that.
It's so fun to imagine, Jen, because when I'm looking at you, I'm seeing all of the blue, but suddenly that kind of disappears, and you can hear the imagined laughter returning to that space and the life that abounded.
Yeah.
I mean, the gift.
Yes, yes, you are helping me look at my homes in a whole different way, Leah and Jen. This is beautiful. Any opportunities for you folks to collaborate in the future?
I hope so, Jen. I would love to work with you again. You've been a dream illustrator. And if I know anything about dreams, they get bigger and bigger. You don't wake up and they don't die. So
very cool. Let's tell everybody where they can go to find out more, because the book is coming out. We're recording this in November. The book is coming out is it February?
February 10th, 2026.
So it's available for pre-order now. In the meantime, folks are going to want to know where they can go to find out more about both of you. Jen, can we start with you? Where can we go to find out more about you, the work you're doing, the illustrations you're creating?
Sure. You can find me on both Instagram. Do I say my handle? JY_Shin.
Yeah. I guess you just did.
Okay. And then I have a website as well that you can find some of my work at. It's www.jensh.in.
Kalia, where can we go to find out more about you?
Social media, my handle is just my name, Kao Kalia Yang, KaoKaliaYang. And also my website, www.kaokaliayang.com.
Wonderful. And what are you working on now, Kalia?
So next year I have 3 books coming out. The Blue House I Loved, A Home on the Page, and then in October, my first Christmas book. It's called Mama's Christmas Gift. And that's a story that I've been holding very close for a very long time. I'm a kid who knew Christmas only because of Toys for Tots. And of course, my mother's love. And so to put these things together, that's coming in October. I have a young adult memoir that is going to come in 2027, and maybe 1 or 2 picture books as well. So we're in the season of floods. Lots of stories are coming at me, Jed.
That's fantastic. All the more reason for you to come back on the podcast.
I'd be delighted. You asked wonderful questions. I mean, it's such an honor, I think, for me, and I'll let Jen speak for herself, but to entertain these questions and to think about them. You're such a smart reader. Thank you.
Thank you. Jen, any projects you can tell us about?
Well, I'm currently working, I work not as a children's picture book illustrator in all the time, but I'm actually working on a story right now that's about plankton and how they really are engines for life and really create the air that we breathe and the clouds that shade us and feed the deep blue sea. So I'm currently working on a book about plankton.
Excellent. Well, you are welcome to come back on to celebrate plankton, or even if you build a building in Boston, let me know and we'll come down to check it out.
I'll definitely let you know if either of those things happen. And Jed, yes, thank you so much for your really thoughtful questions. It's really an honor, and it's so unique and lovely to be able to have this space to talk about our process and what we found so special about working on this book together.
We've had a really wonderful time speaking to the creators of The Blue House I Loved. It's the new book from Kao Kalia Yang and Jen Shen. My friends, thank you so much for being on Reading with Your Kids.
Thanks so much, Jed.
Thank you.
Before we invite our guest into the studio, I would love to invite you to visit a very special website. It's clownswithoutborders.org. Clownswithoutborders.org. This is a group that I absolutely adore. I am part of Clowns Without Borders, and I had the honor of being part of the 2023 tour of El Salvador. I had so much fun joining with artists from all over the world to bring a smile to people who really needed it and really appreciated it too. And we would love for you to join us as a monthly Joy Maker. The Joy Makers, they're a family of people just like you who love to laugh and make other people feel good. So please take a moment and visit clownswithoutborders.org and consider joining me as a Joy Maker. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a long time. Join us right now from New York City, the brand new executive director and boss clown for Clowns Without Borders, Frankie Tompkins. Frankie, how are you?
Good. How are you, Jed?
I am wonderful. I'm first off, congratulations on recently being named the new director of Clowns Without Borders.
Thank you. It's super, super exciting. I've just been welcomed with such a great group of people. I'm learning a lot as I go. Yeah, so it's just a great new experience.
For folks who don't know, could you remind everybody what first off, that Clowns Without Borders is actually a thing, and
it is a thing,
a cool thing.
Yeah. So Clowns Without Borders, our main mission is to provide relief through laughter. So we send folks. We have to be invited, of course, but we send folks to areas of crisis. Typically internationally, we're looking to expand in the U.S., which I'll talk more about that. But typically internationally, to provide some relief through laughter. I think we can all appreciate that, if you've had a bad day or something's gone wrong and somebody sends us a joke or something, that little bright moment picks us up a little bit. And so I'm sure, as you can imagine, people that are really experiencing trauma could use some relief of laughter. And, the great thing about clowns is a lot of the shows that they put on and the work that they do doesn't necessarily require a lot of conversation. So it across language barriers, it tends to transcend those. And I think that's just such a beautiful thing.
And there's a really neat history. This is Clowns Without, you are the executive director or boss clown of the U.S. branch of Clowns Without Borders, but there's actually branches, I don't know if that's the correct term, but there's Clowns Without Borders in a number of different countries and an international organization.
Yes, there is. In a lot of different countries. The number actually escapes me now of how many different chapters. And again, I don't know if that's actually the right term either. I'm still learning, as I said, but a lot of different international chapters, as well as one large kind of governing international body that typically keeps us all aligned or keeps us all in the loop of what's going on with the other organizations. That way we can collaborate as we see fit.
Mm-hmm. Now, how did you come to be named Boss Clown?
Well, LinkedIn works in mysterious ways. I never would have thought in a million years that I would have found a role like this on LinkedIn. But I was scrolling through LinkedIn one day and I saw the job posting there, actually. And I thought, what a cool organization. And so I read through the job description and I thought, well, I can do that. That just sounds delightful, right? So I immediately applied. I also sent a note to Tim, who I think you know, Jed, who is the interim executive director and has had a long relationship with CWB. And I sent him a note and said, hey, I'm the person. Put me in, coach. And we had a lot of conversations back and forth. And it turned out that I was the right fit. So I joined kind of unofficially in September, more officially October 1. And so, just very, very exciting to be part of the team.
Yeah. And you've had a background in corporate America, am I right?
Yes. So I always say that I've had somewhat of a dual career for the past couple of decades. I started my career working at one of the big four in consulting, doing different varying types of consulting, I guess you would say. That's such a nuanced word these days, I think. But I've done that, mainly focused on acquisitions and integration of mergers and acquisitions. But on the side, I've always had somewhat of a career in nonprofits. I've done consulting work for nonprofits. I've run my own food pantry for the past 20 years on the Upper West Side here in Manhattan. My daughter actually has her own nonprofit now, and I'm on the board of that. And so I've always had kind of a hand in it. And when I was kind of at that turning point in my life saying, what do I want to do for this next part of my career? And I thought, I love all of this other stuff. This is what makes me truly want to jump out of bed in the morning. And so I thought, let me start pursuing more of a career in that line, right? Instead of it just being something I did on the side. And not to take away anything that I gained from my experience in corporate America. I am so grateful for everything I learned. I had some amazing mentors and bosses and experiences, which I think has served me well in a capacity like this. And so I hope to bring kind of the best of both worlds to CWB from my experiences.
Well, one of my mentors many years ago, when it was obvious that I wanted to pursue clowning and magic for my full-time job, he sat me down. He said, Jed, you got to understand that you're going into show business, whether it's magic or music or clowning, you're going into show business. And show business is two words. And business is the bigger of the two words. And if you don't take care of business, there ain't going to be a show.
Yes, absolutely. I totally agree. I joke. So for my volunteers and my friends and people that have supported my pantry over the past 20 years, they always joke that I know how to quickly kind of get everything operationalized to make it run pretty smooth, but in the nonprofit world, which isn't always easy to do, right? When you're leading groups of volunteers, it can be a little trickier. And so I pride myself on being able to manage that fairly well. And I enjoy it. I joke with people that, some of the work that I do, it's not totally selfless. I get a lot out of it, as well. So it's the work that I love to do, and I'm excited, learning so much with CWB and moving that forward. It's a great time to join the organization. There's such room for growth. And so I can't wait to see what we can do next.
Yeah. What are some of the goals that you are bringing to the organization?
So one of the things that we want to do is we actually want to expand our reach internationally. So we want to increase the number of tours we do internationally. But one of my other goals is that I want to do more U.S.-based work. Maybe not necessarily tours, but one-off shows. There's not a shortage, unfortunately, of people that could use this everywhere. We actually ran a local show here in New York in December, and it was just so well received. I was able to go in person, obviously, because it was right in my backyard. And I could have actually watched, as much as I enjoy watching clowns, I could have actually watched the parents and the children that were there as part of the audience. I could have watched them all day. The look on their faces and the pure joy in their eyes was such a beautiful thing to witness. And so it was really nice to be able, because that's not how they walked in to the place. And so to be able to see them walk away a little lighter and just have that moment of peace and joy was beautiful.
I'm happy that you were able to see that. I've joked over the years with my audiences that you have to look at me for 45 minutes when I'm up here, and it's like, I don't know, but I get to look at you, and I get to look at all these amazing smiles, and you do see them when you're performing. At least for me, you do see those smiles, and it just energizes me.
Right. Right. And so speaking of that, actually, is I think one of our other goals is I want to try and do more around, supporter engagement and community engagement. As we are able to potentially do more shows here in the U.S., I think that helps us draw awareness to the organization and to show people what we can really do, maybe even inviting people to some local shows if they're local to that city. Because I think there's such magic in actually seeing it firsthand. And so much of our work internationally, it's great and people can hear about it, but it's very different, as you know, if you see it firsthand. So I think also having some local shows will be great for not just the community, but also for people seeing the real work that we do on the ground, and driving that engagement.
Yeah.
And so that is definitely one of my other goals. And then I think, one of the other ones is probably the same as most nonprofits is trying to diversify some funding, right? We have a lot of individual supporters, which is beautiful. But trying to figure out ways to expand those, and also potentially, are there corporate sponsors out there that would love to help us out? Are there other organizations or foundations that would love to get involved with our mission? And so that is one of the things I'm going to make a priority this year as well.
Well, one of the things that we've been doing here on Reading with Your Kids is just running little spots between interviews, encouraging people to become a joy maker. Can you talk a little bit about that program?
Yeah, so the Joy Maker program, essentially it encourages people to be monthly donors. And it also gives people the option to be a one-time donor or an annual donor. One thing that we did just start is if people are making a certain amount of donations, which we haven't set the amount on, that's how new this is, but we are going to start doing somewhat of a thank you gift or an appreciation gift for people that give over a certain amount. And that when that's finalized, that will be on our website. But part of the Joymaker, our promise is that the money that goes towards that all goes to the tours. It all goes to providing the funding that we need to be able to run those tours internationally.
Yeah. And so those tours, people who've listened to Reading with Your Kids on a regular basis have probably heard me refer to my time touring El Salvador with Clowns Without Borders. Can you talk a little bit about what a tour looks like in some of the places that CWB has toured recently?
Sure. I actually haven't been able to witness a tour yet. I do plan to do that this year. I'm really excited. So you may have more insight to that than I do so far. But I do know that we are in the process of scheduling tours in Turkey, Zimbabwe, Mexico, Brazil, where else? Guatemala, Egypt, El Salvador again. And then in addition to the local ones. But I actually haven't had the pleasure of being on tour yet. I am not a professional clown. I am a clown at heart, I will say, but I am not a trained clown. I am looking into taking clowning classes because I think it would just be great to have. Plus, again, I am definitely a clown at heart, and so it totally fits my vibe that I would take some classes as well. But I do hope to go on tour at some point. Even if I'm just, helping with props or whatever it is, to just really see it firsthand, because I haven't had the pleasure of doing that yet.
Well, on our tour, I was had the honor of performing with two artists, one from the United States, one from El Salvador, who were incredibly talented. We had a phenomenal tour manager who was from Spain and originally from Guatemala. The neat thing about it was that here basically were four strangers coming together. There was zero ego involved. We came together on we had 2 or 3 days. I think we had 2 days to develop our show. And then we had a couple of extra days to rehearse it because it was a hurricane that hit El Salvador and we couldn't travel. But it was such a different experience for me because no one needed to be the star of the show. It was, hey, what do you think and what should we do and how would you like to do this? One of the neat parts of our tours, I made a mistake in one of the rehearsals, and I said, somos payasos sin frentes. I was trying to say payasos sin frentoras, clowns without borders, and instead I said, we are clowns without foreheads. And as soon as I made the mistake, I corrected myself, and everybody said, no, leave that in. And
right.
And it was, and so we had a great time. One of the neat things was that we traveled the length and width of El Salvador, which isn't all that long. It's the same size as Massachusetts, but it's a very diverse country. The cities, there's very rural areas where we performed in very rural areas for indigenous communities and people who were migrating, people who had been displaced from their homes from all the violence that they'd experienced for decades. And so our audiences were always different. We performed in schools and out in the communities and we performed on the street in one city, and it was really wonderful. And everywhere we went, we were welcomed with open arms.
That's wonderful. And I think you brought up a great point, and it's something I noticed right away, especially from somewhat of a fresh set of eyes, is that the artists that I've either spoken to so far or that I've heard about or seen clips of, there seems to be such skill, but also they have the skill, but the humanitarian piece too. And it's such a beautiful blend to where, to your point, here's four people that didn't know each other, but there were no egos, right? Everyone was there because they wanted to be there for that mission. And I think that's such a beautiful thing. And it speaks volumes about the type of artist that we have working with us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One of the things I think I mentioned in a note as we were preparing for the show is I first noticed it many decades ago when I first toured Puerto Rico. And there was, at that time, I could fall and not break a hip. And I would do a pratfall, and I'd get the big laugh that I would get here in the United States. But then everybody applauded. And it really threw me. And the person who had brought me there noticed that it threw me. And he said, these people recognize that you're an artist and that's a skill. You fell out of a chair and off a stage and you got up and walked. And that takes skill. And that's what I experienced in El Salvador. And I know that clowning is this respected art form throughout most of the world. But here in the United States, I know when I first said that I was going to be a clown, I got a lot of strange looks, and people didn't think I had a very pure motive behind it. And why do you think that might be, that we're looked at creepily here in the States, and what can we do about that?
It's interesting because I've witnessed that. I've experienced that long before even my involvement with Clowns Without Borders. I've always had an affinity for clowns. I think it's just part of my personality. I see them as beautiful, loving, fun, characters. But yeah, you're right. Not everyone does. Honestly, I think some of it's learned behavior. I think, for example, I am afraid of spiders, right? I have been very, very careful not to pass that fear down to my daughter because, so if I see one, I don't jump. I try not to freak out because I don't want to pass that fear down. And I don't know I think people do that with certain fears, with passing them down, but I don't think they do it with clowns. I think people are very quick to be like, oh, I don't like clowns, or they say things that either they've gotten from a movie. There's some kind of portrayal that they've seen that was negative, Poltergeist or Pennywise or any of those kind of scary clowns. And I always remind people that scary movies only use clowns because they're supposed to be nice, and then they've made them into this. But it's very specific to that, that movie or that situation, in general. That's just not how it is. I don't know how we solve it. I do know that when my daughter's school had a carnival a few years ago, I was on the parent planning committee, and they said, oh man, too bad we don't have money for a clown. And I said, well, I'll do it. I was like, I'm not, not a professionally trained clown or anything, but, probably I could be decent enough for, the little ones at her school for an afternoon. And so, I went online, I took these YouTube classes to learn how to do a few things. And I got, this great suit, and I went to the school, and I noticed that all the little kids, the kindergartners, the first grade, the second grade, they all ran up to me. They were very excited to see a clown. And the middle schoolers screamed and ran away, being a little dramatic, right? But that's what makes me think it must be learned behavior. That somewhere along the line, someone has made a comment, or they've seen a scary movie or something, or people even refer to, say, a politician they don't agree with as a clown, right? They'll be like, oh, that clown. And I'm like, no, stop calling them clowns. That's not fair. But I don't know how we change that other than, I think we just have to enlighten people. I don't know, maybe some of our U.S. shows will help change the direction. It can't hurt, right?
Right. Well, as you were speaking, I absolutely think that the U.S. shows will help a lot because, I went to El Salvador, and not that I went there for any attention or for praise or I believed in the mission. And other than the folks who follow me on social media and my immediate family and friends, that was it. I went, there's no newspaper. They went this way or that way. And as far as I know, it was the same as the other artists. So, we are performing kind of, away from the spotlight and the fanfare. And I think doing the U.S. shows, I think, will help a lot. I also hope that we can just get some people to understand that clowning is this beautiful thing. There are organizations like the Clown Care Unit that, works in hospitals, and there are different versions of that throughout the country. And we're doing some great things. And I hope and there'll be some amazing clowns throughout the year. So I hope we get back and the U.S. appreciates the art form.
Right. Well, maybe I can help create some positive experiences for some folks. I think that it can't hurt, right? But yeah, absolutely. I agree.
Absolutely. If you had, I mentioned that, I do magic, and oftentimes if I have a teacher here, I said, if I give you this pen and I tell you it's a magic wand and you can wave it and get anything you want to kind of fix education or whatnot, what would it be? If you had a magic wand and you could wave it and make something happen for CWB, what would it might be?
Ooh. Oh, that's a tough one, man. There's so many things that come to my mind, but quite honestly, my knee-jerk reaction would be to have more, because I spoke to the quality of the artists that we work with. I would love to have a larger pool of them, but I don't like the idea of quantity over quality, right? So if I could have a really large qualified group of clowns that we could pull from as we expand the tours, I think that's probably one. So maybe some training courses to get more folks up to speed to the standards in which we perform for our artists, to be able to have a larger pool to pick from as we start to expand these tours.
Awesome. I think that would be fantastic.
Yeah.
Where can we go if people want to be a joy maker, if people want to maybe make larger donations, or if somebody's listening that might want to be part of that larger pool of artists, where should people go?
Love that idea. Clownswithoutborders.org. All of the information's on our website. If anybody wants to reach out to me directly, I'm maybe I'm different than most, but I love email. Frankie at clownswithoutborders.org, and that's Frankie with an IE.
Awesome.
So, yeah.
We've had an absolutely wonderful time speaking to the brand new executive director and boss clown for Clowns Without Borders. Our guest has been Frankie Tompkins. Hey, Frankie, thanks so much.
Thank you.
What a great way to kick off 2026. I love this episode. If you love this episode, if it gave you something to think about and made you smile, please share it with a friend. Leave a 5-star review. And, of course, we'd love it if you could subscribe to the show so you don't miss a moment of reading with your kids. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful, starting with our guests, Kao Kalia Yang and Jen Shen. Also want to thank Frankie Tompkins for being with us last year. I want to thank my team, Fatima Khan, Chris Doherty. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. You are amazing. In 2025, you were there for your kids. You worked hard. You're going to be there for your kids in 2026. Thank you so very much for helping to make the world a smarter, kinder, more empathetic place. And you do that every single time you read with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next episode of Reading with Your Kids.